Okay, so we're going to topic number 6, which is around, that's fantastic, performance manage your staff for better, greater outcomes. If we go to that first slide, I'll just take you through the first slide, which is around understanding performance management. So a lot of people, I always talk about this, they think when we bring performance management in is when someone's in trouble. And this is for, if I could say, more so for the older people. I'll be careful what I say here. I'm not going to shoot this off at the foot, but for the people who started in the workplace, like I was young, like Liam on this hookup, and when we got into trouble, that manager would come over and point their finger and go, I'm going to performance manage you, right? And then it always was this thing that we're in trouble. But performance management in the HR world is about that end-to-end process of, that job analysis, recruiting, recognition and praise, doing those appraisals, the disciplinary procedures that happen if things don't go right, learning and development, and succession planning. So when we look at the whole life cycle, and this is a slide that's come from ARI, which is the Australian HR Human Resources Institute, this is what performance management is. So it actually starts from when you decide to put a person into your workplace, and it happens all the way through their life cycle, right through to the very end. So if we go to the next slide, Alison's going to take you through how to keep your staff on track.
Thank you. So the first key point we've got here is the way the employee is managed is important. So I think I previously said it's no point just ignoring when they're not doing something that needs to be done in a certain way. Have those conversations. The sooner you have the conversation, the less difficult it is to manage them. But that goes for both good and bad managing as well. So have clear and regular communication channels in place. Again, this is the key outcome from today, I think, is the communication needs to be key for any employer to be able to get through to their employees. Have a clear and signed position description, including key performance indicators. So in the position description, you need to outline what their key roles will be, key duties in the role that they're performing, and then you can measure them by having the key KPIs. So when you do the performance reviews and the performance management side of things, you can run through the KPIs, and then you can run through them with the employee and say, look, you're doing really well in this area. This is the area that we need you to improve. And then you can have those conversations there. Have clear and signed policies in place, which we've said, and these state the behaviours which are and are not acceptable as well. We have different methods for reviewing performances, and that could be, one is one-on-one. You might decide that you might need your one-up manager to come into that meeting as well. If that's the case, that's fine. If the employee is underperforming, you can have the conversation with them. You can do two things. You can do a couple of things depending on what it is. But one of the things would be to include a performance improvement plan, which is also known as a PIP. So you might be having a conversation with them. You might also issue them with a warning, whether it's a verbal or a written, depending on what it is. But you can also include a PIP, and that would give them a timeline of how long you have expectations on for them to make those improvements. But it would specify what area they need to improve on. So it's not just you need to improve your performance. You would have to be specific. You need to make sure you arrive to work on time every day, or whatever it might be. You need to make sure you phone clients back within 3 days, whatever it might be. So you would need to specifically outline what it is that they need to improve, and then you can have your check-ins with them throughout the management of that plan. And then if you need to, you can increase the time it takes. But as a standard, we recommend to do a 4-week PIP, and then you can check in them with the particular employee once a week or at the end of the week, just to give them an update on how you think they're going. And that's where we would start with that. And then you can follow through with a formal process if the employee is underperforming as well. As I've just said, you can invite them to a counselling session. You can outline your concerns. You would need to be specific again. And then you need to give them the opportunity to respond to those concerns as well. Thank you, Liam. How to have great conversations. This is really, really good. So be proactive with all your communication, both good and bad. Some managers need some training to have the difficult conversations, because it doesn't necessarily come naturally to everybody, and that's okay. But as long as they're guided in how to have those conversations, then the more comfortable they'll feel as well. So make sure that the staff understand the company direction, your vision, your values, etc., etc., and that they've got an understanding of the company requirements as well. And this all comes back down to not just the induction, but the reinductions as well. You can realign and refresh everybody's memories on how to behave. Ensure you invest the time to accurately reflect upon, evaluate and measure their performance at all levels, specifically against their KPIs. And you can have performance objectives aligned to any strategic or operational objectives the business has got. We also like to motivate the staff through employee development. We had a client recently who advertised for a particular role externally, and he didn't realise that he had somebody internally who could fill that role, and he's now come back to us, and that this particular employee has been offered the role. So not because he was internally, but it was because it was deemed that he was the best fit for the role. But this particular client realised, he said to us that he had this person sitting right under his nose, that's what he said. So I think it's important to know the more you have your reviews with your team, the more you'll understand of what they're aligning themselves with, whether it's in the future or what they want to do now. So then it's important. So you can help develop them as well. And then in the reviews, you can also ask them the areas that they think they need more training, and then you can set up some objectives around that conversation as well. Communication, as always, is a positive. It helps bring out a positive workplace if you've got really good relationships going because of that. Identify the training needs of the business, not just the employee. What else does the business need? So what is missing within the business itself? And all these things can help improve productivity, customer service and your revenue, depending on what it is that you're looking for. Any feedback?
I just want to add, something I want to add is one of the things we commonly see is, I talked about before about succession planning with your staff, and one of the things that we see a lot of is we go into a company and all the managers are not on the same page on how they manage their team. Right, and that just creates mass disruption in the business. And then the other thing too is, there's different personalities. So, we've got a client that's recently come on board with very strong personality. So no one wants to go near that person but they're not on the same page. I think so that what's important is, it goes back to, I'll link this all back to your business plan, your objectives and your standards. Like, do we have everyone on the same page going in the same direction where we want? And if I've got teams, is every leader managing the team the same way, doing the record keeping and having the same consistent conversations? That's a big gap that we see. And we've seen it over the years many times where they've, empowered a young person to become a manager, but because they haven't created a future leaders program or anything like that, what's happened is they put that person to manage their mates, and then they don't know how to do it, and that's where things go wrong. So it is important to, I just think, part of the process is you need zero training, if I can say that, to learn how your financials. You need management training, learn how to manage people, because it's all emotional. And the moment it becomes emotional, that's when things go wrong.
And you don't want to set them up to fail either.
No.
So if you don't provide them with the training and you promote them to a role that they've had no experience in, you've not given them guidance or training, then you are going to set them up to fail. So that's the other thing you want to avoid too. So
you're doing well, Alison. So take us
you.
through the importance of performance discussions.
Okay, so our key points that we've outlined here are: set a clear pathway for each staff member, and these should be in your one-on-one conversations, not in an open environment. It should be engaging and motivating for the staff member. But you want them to want to make improvement and to have that self-improvement as well, because if they don't, then it's a losing battle, to be honest. If a staff member is underperforming, you can put in the PIP in place, and hopefully that's enough to get the person to where they need to be, because it sets a clear expectation, but it also outlines to them that they're going to be monitored, and it is expected that they make improvements as well. So it's like all parents, when you say no to a child, you need to follow through on that, or whatever it might be. So you need to be able to follow through on your threats. Not that we're going to threaten staff, but that's just the adage that I'm using. You need to be able to follow through on and make sure that they know that you are serious, but it can be done in a respectful way as well. So good performance discussions are also about recognition and praise. As I said, we like to tell everyone you manage on a daily basis, and it's not just the bad. Don't just focus on the bad, also acknowledge the good. It's so important to acknowledge the good. If you're just doing one and not the other, then you've not got a very good environment for your team to be working in. So, and see, you can see the team members' capabilities grow, especially when they take on ownership, and that won't come unless you've got those honest and trusting relationships with them as well. Thanks, Lee. So, how to be constructive. So, procedural fairness is something that we banter about all the time, and you need to have evidence to show you followed a process. So there's many cases that go to Fair Work where an employee has claimed unfair dismissal, and Fair Work have gone through the investigation with both the employee and the employer, and they may have found that the employee was not unfairly dismissed, but they might reorganise for the employer to recompense the employee because they haven't followed a fair process. So that they haven't provided them, for example, the opportunity to bring a support person, which is really important, or they've missed a step. So it's really important to make sure you follow the steps, because even if you believe that the employee needs to be terminated, if you haven't followed all the steps, you can still be fined by Fair Work as well. So it's make sure that you follow that procedural fairness, and then you can avoid cases such as that. So documented notes from informal and formal communication. As I said, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. And then with most cases that come through from Fair Work, the onus automatically goes on the employer to prove the claim wrong. It's not up to the employee to prove that it's correct. It'll be up to the employer to prove that what they're saying is incorrect. So unless you've got that evidence to back you up, Fair Work might actually find in favour of the employee who put in the claim. So just be mindful of that kind of thing as well. Invite the staff member to attend a meeting, allow them to have a support person present, and consent. As I said, there is procedural fairness is to allow a support person for any employee for any disciplinary meeting, and it doesn't necessarily mean just for a termination meeting. So if you've got any disciplinary meeting that's official, then you need to provide them with the opportunity to bring a support person as well, because that's one of their rights as well.
And Alison, can I just ask, the support person's role is not to coach and ask questions. What's their role?
They're correct. So they are not there to advocate or to speak on behalf of the employee. Their role is purely to provide emotional support for the employee. You don't need to allow them to speak. They can speak to the employee and provide confirmation of what it is that is being spoken about. It might be you've got an employee who's got ESL, so English is their second language. They may not fully understand what it is that is being said, so they might be able to help the employee understand what the communication is about. But yes, they are not allowed to advocate on behalf of the employee. And despite some employees wanting, you don't need to allow for a union representative to attend. You can have a union representative attend in a role as a support person, but they may not contribute to the meeting. And employees are not entitled to legal counsel in any disciplinary meetings as well. So if they want to bring on along a lawyer, that's fine, as long as it's in the capacity of a support person only. So they can't then dictate how the meeting will be going.
And sometimes, unfortunately, what happens is they bring that union rep in and that lawyer in, and then they muscle up on the business owner, and the business owner is not strong with this or doesn't understand it properly. If I use the word bully and intimidate the business owner, where the business owner gives in, and there's the win. So unfortunately, I'll say it that when things go wrong, it is about making sure that you got people who know what they're doing to take that on. And I reckon there'd be 1,000 cases that we've had where, you know, you've fronted up Alison with, and there's a union rep there ready to go hard at you, and you've just put them back in their box and same with the lawyer. Yep.
Well, in those situations, I don't let them speak, so I don't allow them to contribute. But you have to set those guidelines right at the very start. But again, you're right. A lot of people don't understand their obligations, or what the employee's obligations are, or what the ruling is around a support person as well. So you would need to outline, we've just gone through the opportunity. So the employee needs to be able to respond, and that's another procedural fairness. So again, if you know that they've not done something and you want to terminate them, and you organise the meeting, and then you're going to say in the meeting before they even say anything, we're going to terminate you, you haven't provided them with the opportunity to have their say. They must have their say. So even if you know you're going to terminate them, hold off, have the meeting, allow them to have the opportunity to respond, and then you can go back to them, say, look, we've reviewed and considered what you've just given us. Unfortunately, we deem that you're still going to be terminated, but then you've allowed them the opportunity. So that's really important as well. You need to outline exactly what it is that is unsatisfactory in their conduct or performance. You can't just say, we're just terminating you because we just don't like what you're doing or what you're not doing. You need to have specific examples. So again, going back to, you know, if they're not, if it's a salesperson, if they're not hitting their sales, if it's a customer service person and they need to open up a shop and they're like an hour late, that kind of thing. So whatever it is, you need to be really specific with the reasoning behind the conduct and the performance, and then you're protected. You can't just do it blanket, everything. You're doing everything. So you need to be specific with what it is that they're doing wrong, and then you need to have evidence to back that up as well. So, and give more information about the decision, and this ensures fair and reasonable expectations at the other end as well. Thanks, Lee. So here we've got a slide on trying to understand performance counselling. So the key points are that we've outlined here is that employees have 21 days starting from the day that they were dismissed to lodge an application with Fair Work Commission, dismissed, or in some cases from the day, 21 days from when the incident occurred. So if they were if you've taken adverse action against them, which I'll go into in a minute, it's 21 days from when that action was taken against them. So whether that involves being terminated or something else, they've got 21 days. So unfair dismissal, we've got it's harsh, unjust and unreasonable termination, and a process if the employee claims will be unfair dismissal. So so for example, if someone's been late for 2 days in a row and you decide that you're going to terminate them, that will be classed as unfair, harsh dismissal, and they could very well win their unfair dismissal claim there. General protections, this is a big one. This is where the employer cannot take any adverse action against an employee, and one example we've got here is to terminate an employee, and you can't take adverse action against the employee for any workplace right. So if they've made a complaint about someone, if they're questioning their pay, if they've become part of a union, or other workplace rights such as being able to take sick leave. So another part is if you terminate them because of an attribute that they have, which can include their race, their colour, sex, etc., age, mental disability, marriage status, etc. And obviously these are all discriminatory attributes down here, and that falls under general protections as well. Thank you.
That is the minefield. And look, you know, Alison and I had a conversation before. You know, I was on a hookup last night with a bunch of HR professionals that are in Sydney, and one of the things that I talked about is, you know, companies wanting to survey their staff, who's vaccinated and who's not vaccinated, right? So, and there's a company that's SPC. I don't know, everyone knows who they are. The canned food have put it out in the public out there to say, you know what, we're not going to bring staff back unless they're vaccinated, right? So everyone's got to get vaccinated, otherwise they'll lose their employment. So you just got to be careful because again, you know, like that's a minefield, and the lawyers love that because the lawyers are like, well, you can't say that, you can't do that. They're going to have a field time.
going to be an next hot potato, I think, as we enter into the. I think we've got a poll here. This slide, is that right?
Yep.
I think Liam,
so
when you're ready,
we go with the poll. Here it is. Yep.
Oop.
We just lost it, Liam.
So, if you terminate an employee after their minimum employment period without reason, what could happen? Nothing, as the business is within their rights. A claim for unfair dismissal can be raised within 21 days with ASIC. A claim for undismissal can be raised after 21 days with a Fair Work Commission. A claim for unfair dismissal can be raised within 21 days with the Fair Work Commission, starting from the date they were dismissed. A claim can be made for unfair dismissal anytime with the Fair Work Commission. See what people say. Need some elevator music, don't we?
Yes, it's like that show that was on the other day with Andy Lee.
I watched that actually. It's quite clever.
Yeah, it was a quite clever one. How are we going?
Okay, what's the majority said? A claim can be made for unfair dismissal anytime with the Fair Work. So unfair dismissal, you have 21 days from the date that you were terminated to submit a claim with Fair Work Commission.
Yeah, so I think that's actually the third one on the list there. It's a bit cut off.
Fourth one down.
A fourth one,
down.
sorry. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fourth one down. Yep. Okay, what's the next question, Liam?
If you terminated an employee because they were on long-term sick leave, what could happen? So here's the options. They did not have a medical certificate, so it's the employee's problem. Employee can submit a general protections claim, and we've got uncapped in brackets. Ask my accountant as they process the payroll, they will know. The employee was on sick leave, so there is no problem. Drum roll. Perfect. Most people said 75%. So yes, the employee can submit a general protections claim. So if you terminate someone because they were on sick leave, that's taking adverse action against them, against what is a workplace right. So being on sick leave is a workplace right. And here's a question a lot of people ask, even if they've run out of paid sick leave or if they've got no paid sick leave. So if they're on unpaid, it's still a workplace right. So
yep. You'll be also surprised at how many times the accountant or bookkeeper will get asked about these types of HR issues, and we often have referred work over to you guys because we don't interpret. It's not our role to interpret awards or interpret situations in that sense, but we encourage everyone to sort of make sure that they speak to the right people. Yes, we could process the payroll, but it's a processing function. It's not necessarily processing or interpreting the law in HR. That's not